We have a drawing here of Andy Warhol in Paris in a room that contains drawings and studies, and many of them again indicate friendships that he has with the sitters, but also the travels that he makes to North Africa, in Europe, to the United States. You know, he's an ardent traveller and he enjoys that kind of exposure to new cultures. And these drawings are in a sense some of the best work in the whole show, I think. Here, Andy reclines into this sort of soft chair. You have that certain kind of tension in the shoulders, that sort of fixed gaze. Warhol has a very strong character, we know this historically, and Hockney is able to kind of encapsulate this rather mysterious presence of this seer, Andy Warhol.
I think it's a fascinating drawing, actually, and I think you're right. He's a very fine draftsman, and he definitely takes that into the paintings. Fundamentally, you could look at them as coloured drawings in a way. He's really interested in laying down colour in a particular way. And looking at this again, we think about the later iPad drawings, backlit canvases rather than pieces of paper. But I think you're totally right. He captures Warhol, he captures this kind of languid, tall body and a beautiful, simple diagonal, which works incredibly well. He's very good at leaving things out and letting you fill in the gaps.
We're in a room of works that explore photography. And Hockney has a rather ambivalent relationship with photography. He describes it as a monocular vision, almost like the vision of Cyclops in 1 second. However, he does engage with photography. He's aware of its potential, and so he begins to sort of deconstruct it and analyze it. And here we have a really good work made using multiple little prints that he arranges rather like a cubist painting.
It's interesting, isn't it, because he falls in and out of love with photography. He uses it as his primary medium, he then uses it as reference points for drawings and paintings. Here, as you say, he creates a kind of cubist image of this desert highway. And interestingly, he is the passenger in this car. So what he notices is all the detritus and rubbish that's been flung out onto the road. This is, you know, also the American dream, but it's very different from those cool Californian swimming pools. I love the multiple images, actually. You know, this is Instagram for 30 years ago.
I mean, what you see primarily is the influence of Pablo Picasso, who's a consistent sort of mentor and guide to Hockney, principally in the argument that we do not see the world with a single point perspective, as you find in traditional European painting. Hockney says you're drawing on your imagination, on memory, that our way of looking at the world is not entirely about one point of vision. And so he tries to encapsulate those ideas, that experience, into a work like this that is ruptured, that is discordant and contradictory. You can't find one singular sort of viewpoint within this image.
And you're right, it's much closer to the way the human eye sees. As you and I talk to each other, we are both moving all the time, so there is no one tiny snapshot. It's much more honest in a way.
Yeah, and you have an awareness of the body not being still, but constantly sort of moving in real space, in real time.
So here we have one of Hockney's Yorkshire landscapes, May Blossom on the Roman Road. He came back from California and spent a number of years living in his mother's old house and reconnecting to his home county, Yorkshire, in the north of England. And actually this is happening now. Only yesterday I saw the May Blossom, and it looks like this exuberant, kind of slightly caricatured version of the landscape. No figures, although there's these kind of two looming shadows which are really rather threatening. And everything is turned up, the volume is turned up. Again, you can see his references looking very much like a Van Gogh sky. And interestingly, of course, he could have painted it on one canvas, but he chooses to slot various canvases together, just making us think about Pear Blossom Highway.
I mean, this is a work that really engages with painting and brushwork. There are such strong echoes, aren't there, of Van Gogh, but also Gauguin to some extent. You know, just sort of allowing his pleasure at being in this landscape to follow through into the support, into the painting itself. And we can follow this extraordinary kind of flow and swirl of the sky and see how heavy those sort of bushes are with the flowers, and how verdant. It's almost a kind of fantasy, because it's rare you see wildflowers grow in this fashion along the edges of a road. It's very rich in fertility and fecundity, and this seasonal sense of England in sort of spring and summer.
It's almost psychedelic, isn't it? It's such a strange experience. And I think, although it is a rendition of a country lane, flowers may blossom, these bushes are really scary. There's something quite surrealist and threatening and otherworldly about it.
Absolutely, they kind of take on a life of their own, don't they? It is quite surrealist in that sense, the way in which the landscape begins to suggest sort of life forms and animation. But I should point out, I think, that at this stage in his life, he is spending more time in Yorkshire. There's a nostalgic pull back towards home, towards his parents and family and oldest friends. And so he's looking at this landscape he leaves behind as a younger man to journey to California. It's a reclamation, really, of this kind of English heritage, and connects to, I should just say, of course, to a tradition of English landscape painting.
And as you say, it's never a moment with Hockney, is it? He's looking at his own memories, his own childhood, his own history, the history of painting. So you get all of these layers in an ostensibly straightforward landscape. We're in a room of iPad drawings, and these are not contentious, but some of Hockney's followers, fans, admirers think these are not amongst his best work. Some people think they're the most exciting, brave thing that he's done of late. And of course, he's always played with technology, whether it's instamatic cameras, photocopiers in the 1980s, Polaroid images, multiple images, and now working on iPads rather. So, you know, is it a painting? I don't know. Does it matter whether it's a painting or not? You are working on a sort of backlit canvas, and you're working with light, not pigment. What's interesting is we can see the way he works in here.
Well, we were talking about those cubist assemblages of a print, a photographic print. Well, to some extent, he's able to incorporate ideas of time and progress within these iPad drawings, because he can show on a loop how he makes the work, not only as a kind of aide-memoire to himself, but also to the viewer, to the audience. And they become like films, really, cartoons, animations. Personally, they have a slightly awkward feel, and I think that's more related to the technology. It's not like his extraordinary skill with draftsmanship and drawing has faltered, but rather this is the early stage of this technology. But nevertheless, he's adopting it, isn't he? He's pushing the boundaries of its potential.
I think they're interesting. I like them, and you can see that I'm not so keen on these as the paintings and drawings, not because of the technology, but because I love paint, and you miss the richness of that. There's a thinness to these, a translucence, which I find less attractive. And also it's a weird way, well, it's a new way of making work. You can just undo. So it's actually a different process to painting. Completely.
I mean, there is a certain sort of awkward quality to these drawings. Perhaps it's to do with the pixelation, that it's not fine enough to replicate the drawn line. And I think you're right to point out a kind of loss of materiality, of surface, of texture that you get in paper or canvas. All of that variation that you find in a painting. Nevertheless, this is the future, and Hockney has bravely adopted it. He's addressing it and trying to adapt it to his ends, to his way of looking at the world?
We have an abiding fascination with David Hockney, and he's, in this exhibition, charted 6 decades of post-war Western life. And I think that is one of the attractions, that we go through his life with him. And he's very brave about trying new things. Some work, some don't work. We are with him on his journey, his emotional, his painterly journey. And I think we get a peek into his world, and they're very personal. I think that's one of the reasons they're so attractive. Whether they hold us to account, I'm not sure.
I think after walking through this exhibition, I feel really good being alive without being too sort of, emotive about it. But he reinforces a faith in art, of its value. He's learning, and he leads us through that education throughout his life as an artist, constantly kind of interrogating how a picture is made, about that relationship between reality and the representation of it. And furthermore, there's a way in which he invests the paintings with a degree of dramatic narrative that is constantly engaging. And I think, particularly in the earlier works from the 60s, there's a kind of sort of disciplined hedonism in a very kind of British way. He sort of lets his hair down, he goes with his instinct, but all the time it's very composed, it's very organized, and that produces good pictures.
You're right, he is a brilliant technician. He's a brilliant art historian. He knows his stuff, he knows how to make an image, he knows how to remind us of other images, to put us in a particular emotional situation. And he can do that with fun, he can do that with joy. I mean, they are joyous paintings. They are full of colour, they are full of life, they are full of doubt and celebration. And I think we naturally connect to that.
The curators argue that it's hard to locate David Hockney within art history, and that's ironic because he's an artist who's so engaged with art history. But effectively he resists being pigeonholed, being classified as a member of any particular art group or movement, or affiliated with any one set of ideas about making art. He is responsive to the world, and I think fundamentally that's how we should see his art.
He's a very postmodern painter in that way, isn't he? He responds to what's happening around him. He's not stuck in a groove. He hasn't got a visual manifesto in a way. And so we can continue to discover with him.
Thank you for watching the Art Channel. We hope you've enjoyed this film. You can also share and distribute it. And you can keep up to date with our films on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook.